Shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to begin by giving all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rakakadash. Double honors to the elders and to the apostle of Great Millstone, and enough respect to the brothers out there pushing and spreading the gospel of Yahweh Bahashem Yahushai to the four corners of the world. Now, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashem Yahushai, I'm going to do a lesson on the Feast of Israel, and in this particular lesson, I'm going to be focusing on the Purim. Now, to get, to flush this out properly so we have an understanding of the circumstances that led to the institution of this holy day being established, we're going to be reading the book of Esther from chapter 3 through to chapter 9. And, I don't think this is going to be very long because each chapter has about 10 to 15 verses. So this is going to help us to, really flush this out and also, exclude the unnecessary information about this holy day. So, the book of Esther is, chapter 9, verse 21 says that this holy day is observed, right, on the 15th and 14th day of the 12th month, right? So we're just gonna take that. So it says the feast of Purim instituted, verse 9 and 20 says, and Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king of Ahasuerus, both nigh and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar, and the 15th day of the same yearly. All right, and the month of Adar is the last month of the year, or the 12th. And as we read, that's going to be a lot clearer. Okay, so let's begin in the book of Esther, chapter 3. I'm going to begin with Haman's plot. Verse 1 says, after these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, and advance him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence. Then the king's servants, which were in the king's gate, said unto Mordecai, why transgresseth thou the king's commandment? Now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman, to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did him reverence, then was Haman full of wrath. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had shown him the people of Mordecai. Right, for they had shown him the people of Mordecai. Therefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. There's a video explaining how Haman is an Edomite, and this is pretty much in character. This is in because Esau has what's the word, like a superiority complex. If you don't reverence him, if you don't put him in the same light as you put the Most High, he will seek to destroy you. So this is, within character, and because he's an unrighteous person and a false judge of the earth, he take out the transgressions of one man on an entire nation, with no clear, goal in mind other than to simply destroy them. Verse 3 says, and in the first month, that is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is the lot, before Haman from day to day and from month to month to the 12th month, which is the month Adar. So when we read chapter 9, and it says it's kept in the month Adar. Adar is the 12th month. And Haman said unto King Ahasuerus, There is a certain people scattered abroad, and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of thy kingdom, and their laws are diverse from all people, neither keep they the king's laws. Therefore it is not for the king's profit to suffer them. So he's setting up a plot, and the premise, that he presents to the king to slay the Israelites is that Israelites like to do their own things. They have their own laws, and that they are diverse, separate, in other words, holy from the rest of the nations. And if it please the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hand of those that have charge of the business, to bring it to the king's treasuries. And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it unto Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' enemies. The king said unto Haman, The silver is given to thee, the people also, and do with them as seemeth good to thee. Then were the king's scribe called on the 13th day of the first month, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded unto the king's lieutenant, and to the governors that were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province according to the writings thereof, and to every people after their language. In the name of King Ahasuerus was it written, and sealed under the king's ring. And the letters were sent by post to all the king's provinces, to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, even upon the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to take spoils of them for a prey. The copy of the writings for a commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, that they should make ready against that day. And the post went out, right? The post went out, being hastened by the king's commandment, and a decree was given in Shushan the palace. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city Shushan was perplexed. Which is another good reasons why these Edomites, especially these Amaleks, got to be exterminated, because they're always the first to come up with some ridiculous plans against Israel. When it comes to the kingdom after Solomon, when it fell, the first people to rise up was Amalek. The first nations to come against Israel when we were sojourners, when we were, migrating through the wilderness, was Amalek. It's always these Edomites, Amalek, And now we have Amalek planning the extermination for Jews in the known world. Esther chapter 4 verse 1, it says, When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes, and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and cried with a loud and bitter cry, and came even before the king's gate. For none might enter into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. In every province, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, there was a great mourning among the Jews, and fasting, and weeping and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. So Esther's maid and her chamberlains came and told it to her. Then was the queen exceedingly grieved, and she rent raiment to clothe Mordecai, and to take away his sackcloth from him, but he received it not. Then called Esther to Hatak, one of the king's chamberlains, whom he had appointed to attend upon her, and give him a commandment to Mordecai, to know what it was and why it was. So Hatak went forth to Mordecai onto the street of the city, which was before the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened unto him, and of the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay the king's treasuries for the Jews to destroy them. Also he gave him the copy of the writings of the decree which was given at Shushan to destroy them, to show it unto Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in unto the king and make supplication unto him, and to make request before him for her people. And Hatak came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. And again Esther spake unto Hatak, and gave him commandment unto Mordecai, all the king's servants and the peoples of the king's province do know that whosoever, whether man or woman, shall come unto the king in the inner court, who is not called, there is one law to put him to death, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, that he may live. But I have not been called to come into the king these 30 days. And so Esther's sort of like, yo, I'm in a difficult position right now because I can't just go into the king, you know, and because there's a law that whosoever come in, you don't have an appointment unexpectedly, you get put to death. And she feared for her life because the king has not seen her in a month. And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou should escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. So his message was that don't think that you will be exempt from the judgment upon all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place, but thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? So he's saying, like this is ain't the time for you to be half-stepping and for you to be afraid. This is the matter that concerns the extermination of an entire nation, and you must risk not coming to the king when you are summoned, because regardless of whether you do it or not, salvation shall come from another place, right? And the situation will, in fact, end up being that you are the one that get destroyed, and the entire nation of Israel gets saved. So verse 15 says, Then Esther bade them to return Mordecai this answer, Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, neither eat nor drink 3 days, night nor day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way, and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Esther chapter 5, verse 1, it says, Now it came to pass on the 3rd day, that Esther put on her royal apparel, and stood in the inner court of the king's house, over against the king's house, and the king sat upon his royal throne in the royal house over against the gates of his house. And it was so, when the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, that she obtained favor in his sight. And the king held out to Esther the golden scepter which was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then said the king unto her, What willst thou, Queen Esther? And what is thy request? It shall be even given to thee to the half of the kingdom. And Esther answered, If it seem good unto the king, let the king and Haman come this day unto the banquet that I have prepared for him. Then the king said, Cause Haman to make haste, that he may do as Esther has said. So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. And the king said unto Esther at the banquet of wine, What is thy petition? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? Even to the half of the kingdom it shall be performed. So Esther didn't make a request known right away, but instead she threw a feast, and she brought all the right people, Haman and King Xerxes. It says, Then answered Esther and said, My petition and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it please the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow as the king has said. Then went Haman forth that joyful day with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, that he stood not up nor moved for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman refrained himself, and when he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh his wife. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches, and the multitude of his children, and all the things that the king had promoted him, and how he has advanced him above the princes and servants of the king. Haman said, moreover, Esther the queen did let no man come with the king unto the banquet that she had prepared but myself, and tomorrow am I invited unto her with the king. Yet all this availeth me nothing, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate. Then said Zeresh his wife and all his friends unto him, Let a gallows be made of 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak thou unto the king, that Mordecai may be hanged thereon. Then go thou in merrily with the king unto the banquet. And the thing pleased Haman, and caused the gallows to be made. Esther chapter 6, it says, On that night could not the king sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they read before the king. And it was found written that Mordecai had told of the Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's chamberlains, the keeper of the door, who sought to lay hands on the king Ahasuerus. And the king said, What honor and dignity has been done for Mordecai for this to Mordecai for this? Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, There is nothing done for him. And the king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman was come into the outward court of the king's house to speak unto the king to hang Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. And the king's servant said unto him, Behold, Haman standeth in the court. And the king said, Let him come in. So Haman came in, and the king said unto him, What shall be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor? Now Haman thought in his heart, To whom would the king delight to honor more than myself? So that's his, the Most High caught him in a trick bag. And Haman answered, Hey, the scripture says there's no enchantment against Jacob. Here it is, he's plotting death. And the Most High has it to where he plans the greatest gift instead of death, just like he did for Israel when, what was his name? Balaam, the king of Moab, planned to curse, but it ended up being what? A blessing. So, yeah. It says, So now Haman thought in his heart, To whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself? And Haman answered the king, For the man whom the king delighteth to honor, let the royal apparel be brought, which the king uses to wear, and a horse that the king rideth upon, and a crown which is set upon his head. And let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man with all whom the king delighteth to honor, and bring him on horseback through the streets of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall be done for the man whom the king delighteth to honor. So Haman must honor Mordecai. Then the king said unto Haman, Make haste and take the apparel and the horse, as thou hast said, and do even to Mordecai the Jew, that sitteth at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that thou hast spoken. Then took Haman the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus shall it be done unto the man whom the king delighteth to honor. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hasted to his house mourning, and having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh's wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh's wife unto him, If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but thou shalt surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlain, and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. All right, see. Oh. So even at this time, there is they suspect that if you really come against an Israelite, you won't succeed. But Haman want to keep on being a demon that he is. So the king and Haman brought to banquet with Salaki. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Esther the queen. And the king said again unto Esther, on the second day at the banquet of wine, what is thy petition, Queen Esther? And it shall be granted thee. And what is thy request? And it shall be performed, even to the half of the kingdom. Then Esther the queen answered and said, If I have found favor in thy sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. But if we have been sold for bondmen and women, I had held my tongue, although the enemy could not countervail the king's damage. Then the king Ahasuerus answered and said unto Esther the queen, Who is he, and where is he that does presume in his heart to do so? And Esther said, The adversary and the enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. And the king, arising from the banquet of the wine in his wrath, went into the palace garden. And Haman stood up to make request for his life to Esther the queen, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman was fallen upon the bed whereupon Esther was. Then said the king, Will he force the queen before me in the house? As the word went out from the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. And Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, Behold also the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman had made for Mordecai, who had spoken good for the king, standeth in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him thereon. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then was the king's wrath pacified. Verse 8, On that day did the king Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had not told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it unto Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. And Esther spake again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and besought him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device which he has devised against the Jews. Then the king held out his golden scepter towards Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king, and said, If it please the king, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the thing seemeth right before the king, and if I be pleasing in his sight, let it be written to reverse the letters devised by Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews which are in all the king's provinces. For how can I endure to see the evil that shall come unto my people? Or how can I endure to see the destruction of my kindred? Then the king Ahasuerus said unto Esther the queen, and to Mordecai the Jew, Behold, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and him they have hanged upon the gallows, because he laid hand upon the Jews. Write ye also for all the Jews, as it liketh you, in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writings which for the writing which is written in the king's name and sealed with the king's ring may no man reverse. Then were the king's scribes called at the time in the 3rd month, which is the month of Sivan, on the 23rd day thereof, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commandeth unto the Jews, and to the lieutenant, and to the deputies, and to the rulers of the provinces which are from India to Ethiopia, 127 provinces, every province according to the writing thereof, and unto every people after their language, and to the Jews according to their writings, and according to their language. And he wrote in the king Ahasuerus' name, and sealed it with the king's ring, and sent letters by post and horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries, wherein the king granted the Jews which were in every city to gather themselves together, and to stand for their lives, to destroy, to slay, and to cause to perish all the power of the people, provinces that would assault them, both little ones and women, and to take the spoils of them for a prey. upon one day in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, namely upon the 13th and 12th month, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, the copy of the writing of the commandment to be given in every province was published unto all people, and the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. So the post that rode upon the mules and camels went out, being hasted, right, and pressed on by the king's commandment, and a decree was given at Shushan, the palace. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in a royal apparel of blue and white, and with a great crown of gold, and with raiment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. And the Jews had light and gladness and joy and honor. And in every province and in every city, whithersoever the king's commandment and his decree came, the Jews had joy and gladness, and a feast and a good day, and many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them. Now in the 12th month, that is, the month of Adar, and the 13th day of the same, when the king's commandment and his decree drew near to be put into execution, in the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, though it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them, the Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt, and no man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people. And all the rulers of the provinces, and the lieutenants, and the deputies, and the officers of the king helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the king's house, and his fame went out throughout all the provinces. For this man Mordecai waxed greater and greater. Thus the Jews smote all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, and slaughter, and destruction, and did what they would unto those that hated them. And in Shushan, the palace, the Jews slew and destroyed 500 men. At Preshadatha, and Dalpha, and Asapha, and Paratha, and Adalia, and Aradatha, and Parmashta, and Arasai, and Aradai, and Vijesha, 10 sons of the 10 sons of Haman, and the sons of Hamadatha, the enemies of the Jews slew they, but the spoil laid they not their hand. And on that day the number of those that were slain in Shushan the palace was brought before the king. And the king said unto Esther the queen, the Jews have slain and destroyed 500 men in Shushan palace, and 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the provinces? Now what is thy petition, and it shall be granted to thee? Or what is thy request further, and it shall be done? Then said Esther, if it please the king, let it be granted to the Jews which are in Shushan to do tomorrow also according unto the day's decree, and let Haman's 10 sons be hanged upon the gallows. And the king commanded it to be so, and a decree was given at Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. For the Jews that were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day also of the month of Adar, and slew 300 men at Shushan, but on the prey they laid not their hands. But the other Jews that were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together, and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and slew of their foes 75,000, but they laid not their hands on the prey. In other words, the spoil. Right, if I'm not mistaken. Let's look at it. Yep, the plunder. And on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th day of the same, rested they, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews that were at Shushan assembled themselves together on the 13th day thereof, and on the 14th day, and on the 15th day of the same day, rested, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Jews of the villages that dwell in the unwalled towns made the 14th day of the month Adar a day of gladness and feasting, and a good day, and of sending portions one to another. And Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters unto all the Jews that were in all the provinces of the king Ahasuerus, both nigh and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar, and the 15th day of the same yearly, as the days wherein the king rested from his enemies, as the days wherein the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned unto them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning to into a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, and sending of portions one to another, and give to the poor. And the Jews undertook to do as they began, and as Mordecai had written unto them. So, um, jump to verse 26. Wherefore they call these days Purim, after the name of Pur. Therefore all the words of this letter, and of which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come to them, the Jews ordained and took upon them, and upon their seed, and upon all such as joined themselves unto them, so it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writings, and according to the appointed time of the year, which is why Purim is kept on the 14th and 15th day of the 12th month every year. And that these days, verse 28, and that these days should be remembered and kept throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, that these days of Purim should not fail amongst the Jews, nor the memorial of them perish from their seeds. So this is different in a sense where you don't have to assemble in Jerusalem to keep this. This can be kept wherever you're at. The Purim is a day of gladness and feasting and giving gifts to another, right? Giving portions to another. It's like a party, you know? So, yep, yep. And the same account is written off in the Greek version, right, in the Apocrypha. But it's the same point, and I'm not gonna make this video any longer than it has to be. So with that, I'm gonna end right there. Shalom. Oh, a recap. It's observed on the 14th, 15th day of the 12th month, and the history and the practice of it is as I've read from the book of Esther, chapter 9 to chapter 3 to chapter 9. So with that, I'm gonna end right there. Shalom. Yahweh Shemeshai Brakatham to all the Akims and Akwaf to listening in truth and sincerity. Yahweh Shemeshai Brakatham.